Today we talk deep research API. We can do deep research with just a single API call now. That's the level we're at in 2025.
That's right. That's how easy it is.
Easy. So like we're not even calling LLMs anymore. We're like calling whole applications through our applications on this next level of abstraction.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, the way to think about it is we can call all of deep research, right, through a single API call.
And this seems like it's becoming table stakes. Like I expect to see more people's deep research API come out. It's kind of like this was the most popular use case to build as an LLM application. It was then baked into ChatGPT. And just as ChatGPT came out first, the developer API came out later. We see deep research through ChatGPT came out first. The developer API comes out later. Here we are. We're ready to build with the developer API today.
That's right. It's been a whirlwind. It's nice to finally see the agent behind an API that you just call and it works the way that you think it would work, at least most of the time.
The agent behind the API, we will get into this today. And just, spoiler alert, I guess, we kind of thought this was going to be really simple and there wasn't going to be a whole lot to really dig into on the code, but there actually is quite a bit that I'm excited for you to show everybody today. Maybe you can foreshadow a little bit of what they're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's definitely learning some patterns that we haven't talked about on our Wednesday events, and their utility and the way you can think about these things as we enter this kind of hybrid, half background, half foreground agent systems.
That's right. That's right. Sort of the new layer of the chat completions API is the kind of general responses API. And we're seeing a lot more ways that we can interact with this. There's a lot more sort of maybe stuff to come up to speed on as a new developer. But for those experienced out there that have been following the channel for a long time, should be easy to pick right up and get rocking and rolling, building, shipping, and sharing. So today, we're going to go ahead and kick it off. Wiz, you ready?
I couldn't be more ready.
Let's go. Let's go deep on the research today. I am particularly excited about this one. And Wiz, we'll see you back to build the Wiz research group in just a little while. Okay. So today, everybody, we're talking deep research, the API. And this was really kind of a fun project to put together for all of you. It's something we've wanted to do for a long time. And we can actually sort of now build out ever more complex things easily in ways that we can demonstrate for you guys. So if you want to build your very own research group to write papers for you, you're going to be able to after today. If you got questions along the way, you want to shout out in the chat while we're having a discussion, you want to get involved directly, please just smash the chat or comment directly on your viewing platform. And we'll definitely take a look and get to the top comments, top questions. So today what we want to do is we want to kind of align ourselves to understanding how we really can just hit an API now that does all of these incredible things. We're really kind of hiding multi-agent systems behind a simple API call and then building out our own agent systems just like that. It really is as easy as your first LLM application today to build like highly complex, very agentic things. So what's happening under the hood is kind of the focus of what we want to get into today, how we can leverage the built-in tooling through OpenAI to actually do this. And this is something, of course, that we're going to continue to see throughout the industry, likely to become more and more of a standard as long as it proves useful to everybody that starts building with them, people like you. And then we want to build, ship, and share today. We're going to create a research group of agents. We're going to call it the Wiz Research Group. And we're going to have them write a paper on the hottest topic in AI today, on context engineering. So we want to talk about deep research, and then we want to talk about the API. Not one API, but two, because there's two APIs we need to kind of consider here. And it allows us to really get the full picture of the deep research API itself. And then we'll build our research group and we'll see what kind of paper they can produce today, July 9th, 2025. So deep research, I mean, one of the things that's so important to understand about the deep research capability is that, even in January of this year, when LangChain was studying how their customers were leveraging agents, it was really coming through often research, summarization, report generation. And this is where the industry continued to move. So last December, Google came out with Gemini, producing easy to read, comprehensive reports, the deep research Gemini capability. OpenAI in February came out with deep research through ChatGPT. Again, comprehensive reports. We saw an open source version come out just a couple days later from the Hugging Face team. Open Deep Research, February 4th. We saw Perplexity come out with their deep research, February 14th. We saw Grok come out with their deep search, February 19th. And of course, we saw more and more open source stuff happening shortly thereafter, including LangChain's Open Deep Research, which is something that we teach in all of our cohorts at a much more detailed level. So yesterday's top use cases really become what gets built in to today's apps that we can pull off the shelf. This has been true forever in AI. And so like the top use cases really become the killer apps for the next season. Deep research is fully there. And what we kind of saw is that deep research, while it was released technically on February 2nd from OpenAI, on February 25th, they released the system card. And we can learn a couple of interesting things from the system card. It's a new agentic capability. It does multi-step research on the internet. But what happens when we dive into the paper? Well, it's kind of interesting here that we can search, interpret, and analyze massive amounts of text, images, and PDFs, pivoting as needed. That's pretty dope. And most of us have probably used deep research. We can also read files provided by the user, kind of do RAG, and analyze data by writing and executing Python code, bit of a code agent there. When we talk about how they actually built the deep research functionality, and this is specifically from the OpenAI team, Anthropic's got a great blog post they made about how they built their system, but we're focused on the OpenAI ecosystem today. Deep research was trained on new browsing data sets created specifically for research use case. These browsing capabilities, including searching, clicking, scrolling, as well as interpreting files, in combination with using Python tools in a sandbox and reasoning through and synthesizing large numbers of websites to find specific pieces of information, as well as writing those comprehensive reports. This was all kind of accomplished through this RL approach. Again, on these browsing tasks. What's so interesting is that we can see things like clicking and scrolling here. And so kind of if you imagine under the hood of a deep research capability, they're kind of spinning up an environment where they can actually click and scroll around that computer use capability. Now, we checked this out today, and it turns out this is not something we can buy yet, but it is pretty cool to think about the different layers of stuff happening under the hood of something like a deep research. And so, deep research, in short, it expands the capabilities of the reasoning models, the O3, the O1, the O4 models. And like TLDR, deep research is just a report generator. When we talk about how we can actually use it through the API, we need to go one layer down And we need to sort of understand that we access this not through ChatGPT anymore, but actually through the responses endpoint. And the responses endpoint, this was part of the package of the new tooling released in March. It was when OpenAI released the OpenAI Agents SDK, and they sort of announced this responses API, the sort of next generation of the assistance API. And they released two models that we can use. One of them is O3 for more in-depth. One of them is O4 Mini for, lightweight and quicker. Those of us familiar with the OpenAI model set and ecosystem, pretty familiar with the idea of big beefy and small quick. And that's kind of what we got here for the OpenAI Deep Research API. When we're going to go use the Deep Research API, we have to go through the Responses API first, though. And, in March, when this was introduced, they said, well, this is our new API primitive. It combines the simplicity of chat completions with the tool use capabilities of the Assistance API. And also it kind of deprecated the Assistance API more or less in its wake. As model capabilities continue to improve, this was 3 months ago, we believe the Responses API will provide a more flexible foundation. With a single API call, developers will be able to solve increasingly complex problems, tasks, and using multiple tools and model turns. Indeed, that's what we see with the Deep Research API. So hitting the Deep Research API through the Responses API has a very familiar feel to it. What we're going to do is we're going to put our sort of role and system level message together in the system message. We're going to provide a query outlining what kind of report we'd like to generate. Again, this is just a report generator at the end of the day. We're going to then set up the model response, the Deep Research API response through the Responses API. And we'll choose the model. We'll specify the input. This is essentially just aligning the model with the system message and the user query. We'll specify how hard we want it to go on sort of reasoning or summarization in its report generation. This has definitely an implication on how much time it's going to take to run these models. And then finally, we're going to detail the tools that we want it to use. So we can leverage the web search preview or the code interpreter today. Again, we don't really have the computer use capability yet, but we expect more and more tools to come online in the future. Now, sidebar, we can also kind of connect this to toolboxes, MCP server toolboxes. That's something that I believe Wiz will briefly touch on today, but we don't want to sort of obscure the forest for the trees. So we're going to focus on the core concepts here. And so we kind of see this system, user, and AI response pattern. Oh, how familiar. The Chat Completions API does exactly the same thing. The system, user, and AI assistant response pattern continues through to July 2025. So when we want to go use the Deep Research API itself, we want to understand just a couple more things. From the release, and this was a couple weeks ago, we see, okay, it allows us to automate complex research workflows that require reasoning, planning, and synthesis. But at the end of the day, keep in mind, TLDR, the Deep Research API, just like Deep Research through ChatGPT, is just a report generator. That means the input and output schema is quite simple. Prompt goes in, report comes out. And when we get that final output, for those of us that have spent a lot of time, looking at reasoning models and looking at reasoning paths and reasoning traces, we get all of this stuff if we want it. So we can parse the final response. We can kind of deconstruct the report, the citations, the reasoning steps, metadata from the source material. We can inspect the different parts of what's going on here. And we can also kind of look at each and every tool call and subsequent reasoning step that was taken. This is obviously quite useful, especially during debugging. And for those of us that are familiar with building agent applications from scratch, this should feel like very much part and parcel of doing this kind of work. And we can also note a key difference between the ChatGPT version and the API version. Namely, the ChatGPT version is going to basically ask you, the user, some clarifying questions. And this is done on purpose because it allows you to sort of get better responses. Whereas the API, it's sort of putting that responsibility in the hands of the developer. And so we've got to do a much better job of really specifying what it is that we want. And so configuring exactly what the input is to get a good output is the same game. It's the same game we play with all of our applications. It's prompt engineering. It's, you might even say, context engineering. But it really is just prompting, okay? And it's like either one, write a really good prompt, or two, and these are literally the best practices put out by OpenAI, or get another model that's better than you at writing prompts to rewrite your bad prompt. That's kind of what ChatGPT Deep Research is doing under the hood. But as the developer, again, this is your responsibility. So what does a good prompt look like? It looks like, what's the scope of the project? Are there specific comparisons you want the report to be looking at making? Are there metrics that you want calculated, specific regions of the world, or maybe preferred information sources? And of course, just like all prompts that are good, that are aligned with the output, we want to tell it exactly what kind of output that we want. And so, you know, if we sort of back up for a second and say, okay, that sounds all pretty good. I think there's an important point here that we sort of alluded to in the beginning that I just want to double click in on. So Wiz, let's just comment on this. Let's sort of think about this idea of the Deep Research API report generator. So just hitting this API, this is actually using an agent. Is that right? And is that different than when we hit an LLM that isn't Deep Research?
It is. So yes, it is an agent, right? I mean, this is kind of the idea. It is a you can give it tools, it can do stuff, you know, that you'd expect an agent to do. So it very much is an agent. The way we're hitting it is like it's a model, right, through the responses API. But the thing is, on the back end, doing something agentic, it's using tools to provide that final report, right?
Yeah. So like, you know, when we teach people to build their first application, they just hit an LLM API. And when we just hit an LLM API, we get input, output. That's not an agent. Although, like, sometimes people put LLMs there and we sort of call it an agent if it's doing some sort of reasoning and action you know, step in our workflow. But it's like, I just want to zoom in on this idea that like the agentic part of this is actually behind the API for the first time. Whereas historically, because we're doing LLM calls also behind the API, but historically, like as we've built these agent systems, single agent, multi-agent systems, we've kind of been on the other side of the API, and we've kind of been, you know, zhuzhing up our reasoning capability more or less from scratch. And now it's kind of off the shelf reasoning in almost a similar way to pulling a large reasoning model off the shelf, that we're sort of getting this great agentic capability by just hitting an API, by just pulling it down off the shelf and using it. And this is sort of the new thing that, if like it becomes as easy to build your first agent as it is to build your first LLM application. All of a sudden, boom, with the deep research API.
That's right.
And so, that's pretty cool because like it's never been like that before. And so, I just, anybody that's getting started today, like I would almost recommend go mess with this. If you can set it up to hit an LLM, you can set it up to hit the deep research API. Then you can say, I built my first agent, boss, instead of, I think I built my first LLM. And so it really is like that easy to kind of, in the year of agents here, build, ship, and share your very first agent. And that's the point I want to make. Anything else to add to this?
No, that's exactly right. So it is, we're entering the phase of where we actually see people using these things rather quite, again, this is complex behavior. It does, it is just also something that we've wrapped behind an API, which we've seen and done before. And I think that's very, it's sign of the times that we're going to see more of these agent systems behind the API. And the thing is that it's the deep research agent is something that's been battle tested through the UI experience that they've had time to discover edge cases for, and now we see finally it revealed through the API. And I think that's indicative of the fact that, these systems are not easy to put into API format, right? We've had deep research for a long time, but we're only just now seeing it come to fruition. So I think that's telling in some way.
Yeah, that's a great point. And when I was reviewing the system card in preparation for this event, I noticed most of the system card is about evaluation. Most of it is about finding those edge cases, making sure it's not going to cause any harm or damage or have any sort of real toxic or super biased outputs or any of this kind of stuff that we know we don't want. And so, that is, again, it's not every tool that's going to be battle tested that hard that we're going to be able to then get into the hands of the developer. But it is the very first sort of, almost human-like agent here that we can start building teams out of, which is what we're going to do next. So let me introduce this and then we'll see you right back, Wiz. So we're going to build today the Wiz's research group. Hopefully this is something we can continue to build out as the agents become better and better at doing this kind of job. Now, this is timely because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but like there's a real big problem happening this summer. And it's like AI has destroyed the job market. Everybody's worried that college isn't useful. Everybody's like entry-level jobs are going away. And the idea that like the deep research API thing is behind just a simple function call like that is part of this that's happening. And there's great kind of memeage out there to talk about research in universities now. And we've heard a lot from OpenAI and others about the kind of PhD level greatness of something like a deep research agent. And so we wanted to find out, like, is it true today that like if the problem is university is not that useful, but maybe AI is, could we all sort of become our own professors with our own research groups without even going to university now? Like, could we do this? And I think the answer is yes, but it's not clear exactly how well we can do it yet, but we can do it poorly for sure. And so what we want to show you today is how we can do some deep research through the API by building out the Wiz's research group to help us write a paper on the hottest topic in AI. You guessed it, context engineering. The delicate art and science of filling the context window with just the right information This is from Andre Karpathy. Now, context engineering is super interesting because it's very deep. Maybe it's as deep as deep research, Blackcurrant. Maybe it's deeper. Because when we talk about instructions and knowledge and facts, we're kind of talking about patterns we know, prompt engineering, RAG, and agents. And so could we build something that sort of mimics a research group that can produce a result that gives us a coherent narrative on context engineering? Well, we're going to try to do this in 4 easy steps. We're going to ask it to make the paper, to write the paper. We're going to put it in the hands of a PhD level agent and a master's level agent. And we'll use our 2 different types of models that we have behind the Deep Research API. Then we'll do a final synthesis before we develop a PDF survey paper that looks something like this. Does a pretty good job on RAG. What does it not do a good job on? With the emergence of context engineering? I guess we'll find out as we head over to the Wiz, who's going to show us how he's built out his own PhD student, his own master's student, and his own paper generation pipeline. Welcome, everybody, to the Wiz Research Group on context engineering. This should be a fun one. Buckle up. We've got a lot of code to show, more than we thought. So, Wiz, take it away. Over to you.
Yes. Okay. So what we have today is a pretty straightforward, thing to show. So first of all, we're going to talk about our, the Deep Research API and how we can use it. So number one, it's not that difficult to use, right? It is just leveraging the responses API, something that you're likely used to if you've heard of OpenAI before. This is the idea. We have some OpenAI API key. We set up our clients. We enable our, tracing, right? So basically, this is going to say we don't want or we do want to keep traces. This is important if data retention is important. Then, of course, we have the background mode. Now, the background mode is, very usefully just for background mode. We know that these agents take forever. And so running them in a way that isn't just we're sitting there with the process waiting forever and ever is important. So you see here, you're a professional researcher preparing a structured data-driven report of blah, 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 blah. Research the Winnipeg Jets 2024-25 season and their playoff run, right? So you'll notice, this is the first time we're calling this, it's exactly just the responses API, right? So we create a run. We point to the model. In this case, the model is just deep research. We give some input, right, which is going to be our system message and our user query. And then we say, hey, use reasoning, as you will automatically. This reasoning summary does require you to be in a verified organization. And so just to, omit this line if you're not. And then we're going to give it some tools, right? And the tools it has is the web search preview tool and then some code interpreter tool. It probably won't need this code interpreter tool, but, you can imagine if there's a CSV that contains, wins or stats, then it can write some pandas code as deep researchers want to do. But then we say background equal true. And this is, of course, what kicks us off as a background job. So when we run this, we just get this coroutine. We don't care because what we do now is we just pull it. And we pull it until it's done. Or we can wait for a while, right? And you can see here, we pull it every 2 seconds, because why not? And we see it takes a while, right? We get a lot of it's queued, and then finally it's completed. We get our output, They finished 2025 with the league best record. That's true, by the way. They won the most games in the regular season, or got most points to be more correct. Right, Mark Scheifele, amazing. We love to see that. Connor Hellebuck, we love to see that. The idea, though, is that this is just the usual deep research report, right? Except it's given to us through the API. You'll notice, though, which is interesting, right? You'll notice, though, that the actual, identification of the report, or formatting of the report, or length of the report is different. And this is because, again, it's not exactly the UI experience, right? We're not using the same system process. We're not using the same workflow exactly, right? And so this shows you kind of how much you can change or modify or tailor that experience, which we're going to abuse in just a moment. You can also use this as a simple agent. And the way we do that is using the Agents SDK from OpenAI. We name our agent, we give it a brain, we give it some tools, we tell it what it does, right? And then we run it. And you can see here, we get the classic report style, markdown, bullet lists. We love this. We can see all the things it searched, right? In this case, the query is, what is the economic impact of AI on the future of work? And at the end of the day, we see it's definitely going to be, existent at worst. And then we can pretty print it and see a result we're probably all very used to seeing, which is the output of a deep research report, right? Classic markdown, classic linking for sources. This is basically just the deep research agent that you know and love from the UI. Now, that's how you use it, right? We're used to using models many times. Everyone uses models. Everyone uses deep research. It's dope. We can do it through the API. What do we want to do? Something a little bit more complicated. What we can do is we can create this absolutely beautifully named Circle of Magi. The idea is that it's the same process as before, right? We're going to submit our API key, except this time we're going to offload the deep research to two different deep researchers, the O3 deep researcher and then the GPT-4 mini or 4.1 mini deep researcher. And we're also going to have a synthesis agent, which is going to help combine the two reports. So let's look at what we did here. And then we have Report Lab to turn it into a PDF so that we can be in data format compliance. Of course, classic, we get some research findings. You love to see it. Classic, you get some survey papers. You love to see it. That's it. What else are you going to do? We have our research session, right? Which is going to be what are we actually researching. Then we have some prompts. Now you'll notice we have our PhD agent prompt, which we're asking to conduct deep, comprehensive industry surveys, right? A bunch of other stuff. And then we have our masters conducting broad industry surveys. So we're trying to prompt our way out of this box, right? We know deep research is actually rather not very deep, unfortunately for us. But we're trying to get something. The idea is we are looking at the overall prompting strategy here to help us understand the flaws in this system. We're going to try to prompt right out of the box. This is the idea. But then we have our synthesis agent, which is just going to synthesize things together, synthesize information together. This is very classic. This is very standard. We want to write a paper and we want to write it well. Spoiler alert, it doesn't do that. So there's more work to be done as always. And then we create agents for each of these, right? Very classic. We just create some agents. There you go. Then we tie these agents together. Very, very easy. What we do is we take the workflows that you are familiar with Agents SDK, and we essentially just roll them out into this final agentic workflow, right? And you can see all this is doing is it's tying these agents together, and it's making them, it's basically just tying them together to, pass the output to the next stage. That's it. We basically get two reports, we synthesize them into one report, and then we turn them into a final report. Someone asked the all-important question: how is this different, right? And you can see here that we can use this, and we can generate a sweet research paper, and we can generate an abstract with a PDF. Very cool. But the idea is, instead of building the agent directly, so you can imagine it like this, right? Instead of using just a home-built agent, we're using this tried and true information gathering agent. We're using this complicated system that OpenAI has designed to outsource this information to our actual research team. So instead of building this research agent, we are just leveraging the research agent, and that's kind of like the crux of this whole thing, right? This is expensive because it's using deep research, but the results are hypothetically much better, right? And this is kind of the idea. And again, this is just something that was whipped up quickly, but the idea is we can extend this to many different applications, and we can again rely on that tried and true and battle tested agent that OpenAI produced. That's that. You can deep research. It's an API form. What I'm going to do is pass you guys back to Greg. Before I do, I have to ask you to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, everything like that. There you go.
All right. Thanks, Wiz. Okay. So what I'd like to sort of chat with you about here, you mentioned a couple things. And one of those things was that we kind of have this idea of like deep research versus kind of wide research. And so what I'd like to kind of double click in on is like, how deep was this able to actually go? And like, how might we make it even deeper? Like, to this question of, if we built our own, could we do better? I think the interesting thing that comes up for me is like, what's the baseline of building a multi-agent report generator yourself? What's the baseline? Obviously for humans, we kind of know that. That's kind of hard to hit. But like, how would we know if, so two questions. First one, how would we make this go even deeper? Like, could we, as a sub call to the deep research agent, call another deep research agent, and go like 2 levels deep? Or how would you sort of recommend trying to get a better paper by going a little bit deeper first?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is basically like, I'm trying to think of the best analogy. I'm struggling a little bit, but the idea is like, this is a build versus buy question, right? So we can build these systems, or we can buy these systems.
That's right.
There's nothing stopping you from building this system, but it's now available to buy, right? And something that's interesting is we know that saying we know it works is tough. It's a little bit, I don't want to say misleading, but it's potentially misleading. The idea is we know that it could work, right? And we know that it maybe should work because OpenAI has been testing it for the last, N months. And this is something that gives us a little bit of a head start. But again, you could and have been able to build deep research the whole time. The idea is that we're now leveraging this massive volume of tested deep research agent behind closed doors. We can also attach it to different data sources and yada yada. But the idea is that this lets us see it. And as for the question of how do we go deeper or how do we go wider, right? We now have control over what it does next. So let's say I go deep and then I get a bunch of, I have it generate a bunch of new questions based on that report. And then I go deeper yet again by spinning up, some sub deep research tasks. And then I go deeper yet again, right? So we have the kind of levers to control, in some sense, depth and breadth. And I think this is something that is now able to be done programmatically as opposed to, smashing the keyboard, which is
I mean, but at the end of the day, isn't it just about like getting a good prompt? Like it seems like there's only one end to this thing, and it's the prompt. So like, are we just back at prompt engineering 101, just with bigger, beefier tools that we need new prompt engineering best practices for? Is that, is that really?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like where we are here, because that's basically, that's what I took to this question from SciTalk TV, right? It's like they said, well, there's a main difference. And the main difference between ChatGPT version is it doesn't ask you for clarifying questions. So the developer API assumes your prompt is good on some level.
That's right.
And, it's probably not that good. So, here we are again. The tools are crazier, but the techniques are the same as always. So, how would you recommend, based on your just little bit of playing with it so far, really dialing in the prompt for this? Of course, there's best practices for deep research in general, but now that we're stacking these things, we're kind of in this at the edge space again.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you're right. But it's not different to, this is the interesting part. It's not different.
Yeah.
To what we've always done. It's just like the next level. Something that I did notice playing around with the deep research API since it was released is that it is so we've kind of learned the deep research pattern, right, through the OpenAI UI.
Yeah.
And we're in a situation now where we're actually having to kind of relearn the correct way to use it, because now we have control of more of the flow. And so we're back into this context engineering space of how do you best equip this very powerful thing with enough stuff to make it be very powerful, and how do you design the prompt to make it be very powerful? You know what I mean? That's the thing.
Yeah. So I mean, there's kind of a basic RAG prompt now. So maybe in 6 months there'll be a basic deep research API prompt, but it's not quite there yet, kind of thing. And I guess you could put it into DSPY or something, because it's just input output. It's just the time it takes to do like inference. It's not inference really anymore. It's just a whole bunch of stuff. It's just a longer time. And so then the evaluation methodologies for it to say, was that good or not? That's just going to take longer too, because there's more stuff to evaluate. It's not just a simple output. It's like a whole freaking report. So how do you evaluate that? And so, this whole new layer of abstraction is just so interesting to think about optimizing. And then you add multiple agents into the mix, and it's like, and it's like, well, so the next thing I want to sort of talk about, and this is related to, I think it was Chris's comment here. He said, doing graduate program is not just about digging, summarizing, and analyzing, also about synthesizing. And you said the synthesizer agent is a bit of a gold standard here. Like, what is that thing doing? And how should we think about even optimizing just that piece of it?
Well, it is though, right? I mean, not to discount Chris. I think Chris is right, coming from the right place, but kind of it is, right? It is about digging, summarizing, and analyzing information. I mean, that's what we do, right? I mean, you're not until you kind of hit post, these kind of like post grad, you're doing your PhD. Do you actually have to contribute anything? You know what I mean? Like, otherwise you're just looking at stuff.
Yeah, you're supposed to. Yeah.
And I think though, when we talk about synthesis, right, into novel ideas. I think people have this way of thinking about it where the LLM can't do anything new, right? This is like a very common trope. LLM can't do anything new, but it can it can see A plus B and say, oh look, A plus B, right? And for a lot of human postdoc, or PhD, especially master's work, right? That's what you do. It's like, hey, like, oh, we have concept A, but what if we added B, right? And that's what the LLM can do. And I think this is something that deep research really helps with, because it lets this very complicated system fetch A through Z, and then we can present it all together and say, okay, so find me the best, X plus Y that's in this pool of information and in this context. And, with all this surrounding world knowledge, why is it best? And in any case, the synthesis is required, because without it, it's just two reports, right? And we could just read two separate reports. So we need to combine and transform them into a single takeaway, which is what this research is.
That's pretty simple. Okay,
yeah.
got it. Well, so let's think about this idea of like what we actually produced here. Let's take a look at it together. Let's take a look at this paper. And I think it's interesting because we just talked about context engineering in our course. And so we recently went and researched and summarized and thought about this. And in fact, we've got a context engineering event next week that we want to go into great depth. The first thing that I would look at in this paper, if I had some graduate students and I was the professor here, is I would go to the end and I would say, okay, did they get the right references here? And what are they missing? Because if they're not looking at the right stuff, they didn't do a very good job searching and researching. And so, we got the Phil Schmid one, 2023, maybe not, but okay. And we got, this is maybe the Toby Lutke Twitter post or something via Data Science Dojo. Interesting. Then we're getting kind of a lot of other stuff here, but we're not getting some of the key blogs that I have recently given to our students. We're not getting, some of the things that I would have liked to see the deep research tool get. So if we wanted to sort of debug this, what would the approach be for that? Like, we have access to every single reasoning step. Is that right? So we can look at it just like we do in Langsmith with a LangGraph application, or not so much?
That's absolutely true. Absolutely correct. So, one of the things we can think about too, right, is when we're looking at all this information and we're seeing like the volume of information that it's collecting and the volume of sources that it has, and our strictness for what those sources should be, et cetera, et cetera. It is a interesting, problem to try to solve, but we do have access to all the traces, so we can see what's going wrong when, right? In this case, the synthesis agent is simply not producing enough. It's not pulling enough from the fetched researches, right? So if we were to look at the individual researches, we would see that there's tons of information there, but the deep research agent has decided to largely ignore a lot of that. And so this is the kind of thing that we can see and we can have access into when we have these systems built with the OpenAI Agents SDK.
So we could look and we could see like who dropped the ball here. Was it our PhD student? Was it our master's student? Was it our synthesizer agent? And presumably, I'm just going to blame the synthesizer agent. I just look at that. I look at that guy like he's the supervisor. He's the boss.
That's
and
right.
It's like you're responsible for the final product here. And like, maybe is that where we go in and we sort of, modify the prompt to the synthesizer agent? We go in and we say, hey, kind of like we would with a real PhD student. We say, hey, come here. Like, let me start with these couple papers, start
That's
with
right.
these couple blogs, okay? And then, see what else you can find. And you could tell the PhD student, you could say, hey, listen, go start with these, look at any references in those papers, and then
That's right.
follow, let's call it the trace to future papers down the line that were more foundational. And, maybe we say, okay, span this many years. We say, these are the foundational components. And all of this is then going into the prompt. All of this is then optimizing the initial context, not relying on kind of the context to be magically generated for us because we have a magical agent. Because there's stuff in this report that I just really don't like. Context engineering is pivotal in advancing AI's capability to act with human-like situational awareness. What? It's like, I don't know about that, bro. I don't know about that. That's a stretch. And it does the thing, but it does the thing really poorly, right?
Yes.
Formatting is bad.
The formatting is bad. The research is good, but the synthesis step is really just hosing us, right? It's full of hallucinations. This is something that I think is a classic, which is that we're going to contend with this, forever and forever. And I think at the end of the day, what we want to see is building systems that do better across the board, right?
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so I think there's a couple questions I want to get to, but first let's go ahead and kind of close this thing out. We've got a few conclusions people can take away from this. This is very, hopefully fun kind of edge stuff. We like doing it, and we hope you enjoyed it today. Like this idea of taking the report generators and putting them together through the API. This is brand new. We can all of a sudden do this. What should we do with it? Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. And hitting these things is the same as hitting LLMs. We can build the research group, or we can kind of buy the research group. It's kind of the same. Well, of course, we can hire a bunch of researchers, but we can just hit the API instead. And in fact, like if you had a really terrible master's student, very, very young, some 20-year-old, 21-year-old kid that then is trying to provide you with like the state of the art on anything, they're going to probably produce some really garbage report if you don't give them any really good instructions too. And so I really think it's super interesting to think about the baseline, super interesting to think about, how to leverage these kinds of tools, whatever your job is, whatever stuff you have to analyze and synthesize. And it's just sort of a really interesting time to, be coming up in the game. That's for sure, as a fresh grad. So, Wiz, I wonder if maybe we can talk a little bit about cost here. There was a great question about how much did all of this cost? Any comparison on the costs? So let's go ahead and just let's talk a little bit about was this $5? Was this $1? How much does it cost to hit an API? In your experience building?
Yeah. So it was it was less than $1 to do the circle of Magi.
Circle
example.
of Magi. Yeah.
Yeah. And
so that paper cost us $1 to write.
Well, less than $1, but yeah.
Okay. All right.
Not
ripped off. Okay.
Not 50 cents. The idea is that these models are expensive because they are doing a lot. And every time you use them, they're doing a lot. But this is the way I would think about it, right? Because the ask is the comparison of cost. We can expect that if we spend a lot of time designing the system, right, we're not going to be fighting with the deep research part. So the research was good. The synthesis was less good. Right. So building a more sophisticated synthesizer.
It was, and you're saying this, we didn't see this as the audience here.
That's right.
So maybe we should call it some research as opposed to deep research here in the chat. I mean, that is the way it feels when it comes out. So you're saying like the PhD student and the master's student, they did a good job, but this
Great job.
synthesizer, bro, like, what are you
The
doing?
synthesizer dropped the ball so hard.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
And I think this is something that's important to think about, which is like, when we have the initial research done, which is the expensive part, right? Building a synthesis machine, which is the hard part, we can just reuse those outputs, right? And we can continue to work from that state. And when we're doing iterations, we can feel more confident that the researching part, the part that actually provides us with all this context, is done rather well, right? As has been battle tested over the last months by OpenAI. But we still have to build the best synthesis machine. And that is going to be context engineering, right? That's us engineering the context to be in the right place, to be manipulated in the right way, right? And that's the piece that we need to be most quote unquote worried about.
Well, I'm struck by what it is we do at AI Makerspace is we synthesize. Like, it is easy to do the research with these tools. I go to O3, I say find all the stuff, be exhaustive, I optimize my prompt. And then it is the synthesis piece. I do believe that so many people, it's not a lack of information, it's a lack of the right information, the right quantities at the right time. And it really is, it's almost like these tools allow us to focus on that next synthesis step, is maybe the conclusion I come to today, which, hey, bodes well for what we're doing here at AI Makerspace. We try to synthesize each week what the most important things are in the industry, and we'll continue to do that. In fact, we're going to kick off our new mastermind series, Wiz, for enrolled students, for folks that have been alumni. And there's so many things each week that we just don't have time to talk about on the channel that we want to bring to a larger audience. So everybody who's a regular, definitely look out for that. And, hopefully we'll be able to synthesize even more regularly on a weekly basis. And perhaps there's a role for the Circle of Mages and the Wiz Research Group to play in that weekly mastermind series. So this was kind of a fun one, Wiz. I enjoyed it. Thanks everybody for smashing the chat today. We will see you back next week to talk context engineering, Wiz. We're going to do the big overview, and we're going to really talk about building something where we obsess over optimizing the context, not just the power of the models with terrible context behind the scenes. All right. Thanks, Wiz. We'll see you back next week. It's time to wrap. So join us next week, everybody, for context engineering. We threw the link in the chat. Go ahead and RSVP for that. And then finally, we are enrolling for Cohort 8 of the AI Engineering Bootcamp with an early bird special in July. That means if you get the challenge done, you can enroll and join us in these mastermind sessions as early as next week for 20% off the manufacturer's suggested retail price. So thanks everybody for joining us for the Deep Research API event today. We'll see you next week for context engineering. And in the meantime, keep building, shipping, and sharing, and we'll do the same. See you all real soon.
But Greg, how do they get started building, shipping, and sharing?
Getting started is the hardest part, like it was for you and for me. You can get started with the AI Engineer Challenge, and you can share it in the Build, Ship, Share channel on Discord. Links in the description. What if they want to accelerate their ability?
Well, we actually have a 10-week intensive bootcamp where you learn to build, ship, and share production-ready LLM applications every single week.
The AI Engineering Bootcamp, cohort starting soon. We'll have you building, shipping, and sharing
like a legend
in no time. We'll see you in class.